quite what happened. I don't know if I have it set up right, but it doesn't look like I'm streaming to YouTube tonight for some reason. I'm not sure why that happened or what's going on with that. I'm still figuring out all this technology. But hey, I'm on Facebook, and that's kind of where my main communication is. So I'm going to continue. And like I said, I've got an outline. So hopefully people are actually still watching. That'd be nice. And we'll go from there. Give me 1 second. There we go. Okay. Had to open up the chat room. Sorry. Hey Amber. Hey Brad. Hope you're still watching. Hope anyone's still watching. Anyway, all right. So what's this video? What's this live is about? All right. I wanted to give you guys a little bit more detail on what this rally is that we're going to be doing. The one you can see on the background behind me. August 28th, Saturday, down at the Capitol. We're applying for a permit. And the reason is because it allows us to do some things, but I'll get into that. So what is this rally for? What is it about? This rally is for everyone that has been and or soon will be further harmed by Inslee's tyranny, by these dictates that he keeps putting out, moving the goalposts, changing the rules, and just absolutely ignoring the law and ignoring the Constitution. That's who it's for. Specifically, it is for all of the state workers, the educators, law enforcement, healthcare professionals, everyone who's having their livelihoods held hostage to surrendering their bodily autonomy. Okay, that is specifically who it is for. This rally is for everyone to unite together in solidarity and action. Okay, and the action is to show force, to show our numbers, and I'll get to that in a second. And this rally is really about COVID mandates, period. Okay, so that brings us to what this rally isn't about. This is not a campaign event. Okay, we are planning a speaker lineup that we'll be announcing as soon as we kind of get it together. But it will not include an endless array of politicians. Now, if we have any politicians speak, they will be proven frontline patriots who have been fighting this battle with us actively. And I got to stress that word, actively, this entire time, not people who are sitting in legislative chambers, back rooms, making deals and saying we have to proceed cautiously and all this nonsense while people are actually hurting. Don't get me going on that. That'll be another video. This is not a hodgepodge bitch fest either. All right. Although I think there's probably going to be a lot of that going on in the crowd. This is not going to be kind of bring every single angst you have against Inslee, against the state, to this. All right. Or at least it's not going to be on stage. You're absolutely free to bring whatever signs you want with whatever messaging you want. But I got to caution you, the more we diffuse the messaging on this, the weaker we are overall. Okay. One of the things that made the rally last April so successful, and then the one in May a little less successful in my eyes, was the one in April was very focused. It was the First Amendment, our right to assemble, period. And that's what we gathered for. Now, people brought to that different things, but that was the message of the rally, and that came through loud and clear. And that's why I think it was so successful. The one we had in May was a little bit more diffused because we got more campaign going on. It kind of started to lose its focus. So I'd like to avoid that one. This one's about the mandates. All right. It's about the mandates coming from the state, plain and simple. Brad, you're absolutely correct. That's one of the people I have in mind. So what are we planning? What is this going to be? I mentioned the stage already. So depending on whether or not our permit is approved or not, and that's still pending, we should hear something by tomorrow. They say 2 days, right? Um, we are looking to have a stage for the speakers. Like I said, that lineup's going to be determined still, but we're not looking to have a lot. We're looking to have a representative or a couple representatives from each of the affected areas. So a couple teachers, perhaps a couple healthcare workers, some doctors, some law enforcement, firefighters, ferry workers, correction officers, people who are willing to put themselves to the hazard for liberty and tell us their experiences and tell us what they're facing. And they're the face, you all are the face of the consequences of this mandate. And so those who are the people we're going to hear from and have on stage. But we're going to have music beforehand. We're going to have music in between speakers. We're going to have music after speakers. We might try to have even 2 sets of stage or music things going on so we can have music going all the time while speakers are happening. We might try to have some stuff for the kiddos, maybe some bouncy houses or something more kid oriented to keep them entertained while they're there. But a lot of the scope is going to be, I'll get to your in a second, Hannah. The scope is going to be determined by 2 main factors. One is whether or not we get the permit. And again, having the permit allows us to not fight with DES or WSP about being there. Number one, it allows us to utilize more of the campus in an official capacity so that we can set up tents or stages or have the food trucks. I think I didn't mention that food. We want food there to feed people, snacks, whatever, whoever we can have to be there. The one in the rally we had last May in 2020 was great because we had food there for people to buy. Ideally, we're going to have that lined up along the diagonals or along the streets, and we're going to be able to really spread out and it not get too compacted with the number of people we want to have there. The second thing is, and it allows us to have, bathrooms available. We had bathrooms last May, but we can have more bathrooms so people aren't standing in line. Funding's another part of this. All right. I set up a GoFundMe and I just got set up a PayPal if you want to do that way. If you don't like either of those, you can send me a private message or send me a message through the website, hazardousliberty.com. And we can figure something else out if you want to send me a check or something. But we're trying to raise I've set a goal of about $10,000 because these things cost money. All right. I'm not made of money. They cost money to put together. DES they don't charge for the permit, but they charge for the services that they provide in terms of porta potties and stuff on site. Not everything can be donated. I mean, if you've got connections, by all means, let me know what those connections are. But again, it's about how much can be provided, how much setup time do we have, and if the more we can kind of put on DES to provide some of that stuff, if they are working with us, I think it's going to be better. So please consider donating and helping with that. And if you got ideas on other ways to help, in-kind donations, volunteers, let me know about that too. Now I did have a conversation with someone today, just really brief exchange of messages. There's a possibility of some outside help on this. Don't really want to talk about it too much until it becomes a little bit more official and a little bit more real. But if this outside help comes through, it'll be very exciting for everybody, and it will bring a lot of credibility to what we're doing. So why this rally and not another one? There's a lot of people planning things and getting rallies together and wanting to do protests, and that's great. And if you're local and doing it in locales and everything like that, go to those, do them. But the reality is most people are not activists. Most people who are center, right of center, are not activists. We want to be left alone. We want to live our lives. We don't want to be out there protesting and getting involved and doing all these things all the time. And you just can't sustain that. you can't sustain weekend after weekend, especially if you're asking people to drive from Spokane to Olympia, or vice versa, from Western Washington to Eastern Washington. People can't make that trip all the time, every time. So it is far better for us to try to put all of our eggs into one basket, one big rally, one big pushback. The other, the other advantage of that is that if we can show numbers, we can get help from other media, from national media. Last April and May 2020, both of those rallies went international in their coverage. I don't know if everyone knows that. They went national and international. BBC covered it. Al Jazeera covered it. Papers in the Australia, New Zealand. It got coverage because it was big. It was the biggest one at that time. Up to that point, was the biggest rallies of any that were going on anywhere. And we had estimates of, on the conservative side, 2,500 people, up to 5,000 people from DES was telling us at the April one at least. If we were to double that, if we had 10,000 people show up to this, we would be everywhere. Our news stories everywhere would focus attention on what's going on here in the plight of our workers, and that will put pressure. That will apply pressure to the governor. So we've really got to think about that, and we gotta consider that. I mean, just one of the Facebook groups that we're involved in, that I'm sure almost everyone watching this is involved in, the Washington State Citizens Against MNRA Injection Mandate. That group, last I checked this evening, has 26,000 members. Okay. If we want to be really pessimistic and say only a third of those are actual people that are against the mandate and that are being affected by that, if that was true, and we had all 1/3 of those show up, 9 to 10,000 people show up, man, what message would that send? Come on. So I'm not saying don't do other rallies. I'm not saying don't organize them and don't promote them. I'm just saying, think about, again, going back to that diffusing the message idea. All right. We need to be united. We need to pull together as much as possible. And everyone thinks that their rally is the most important, and that the thing that they're pushing is the most important. Obviously, I think what I'm pushing is important, but ideas need to be reduced. Ideas need to be reduced to their simplest form for people to really latch onto them and get momentum behind them. This one is against the mandates, plain and simple, against the mandate. This isn't an argument about whether masks work. It's not. Okay. This isn't an argument about whether the vaccine works. This isn't an argument about health, because we know it's not about health. This is about whether or not your bodily autonomy remains intact or not. We cannot stress that enough. If we lose our bodily autonomy to the state, if we surrender that, everything else that follows is academic. It really is, because the state can and they will come along the next time and they will tell you, by the way, now you need this injection. Oh, by the way, we don't want you to procreate anymore. By the way, your hair just doesn't work, so we're gonna cut it off. We don't like that tattoo. You're not allowed to get tattoos. You guys think this is crazy? A year ago, did you think we'd be where we're at now? So, Hannah, to address your question, let me scroll back up to it here real quick. Is this to boost the morale of people or send a message to Olympia? Because I think Olympia is a lost cause. I do think Olympia is a lost cause. What is the purpose of this? It's always to boost morale. right? That's always a given. It's getting people together in solidarity with each other boost morale, and that's always an important part of it. The message we're trying to send is that we think this is a bluff, and we're prepared to call your bluff. And when I say we're prepared to call your bluff, that doesn't mean that I'm expecting them necessarily to back down, which I think they will. It means that we are prepared to make it painful for them. We're prepared to call their bluff and say, you want to win? You win. We're done. You fire us. We're not quitting. We're not getting exemptions because we don't have to. My exemption is my freedom. You win. Shut down the prisons. Shut down the ferries. Shut down the schools you got to. Shut down the hospitals and the clinics you got to. And you're already telling transplant patients that, oh, sorry, you can't get your transplant because you don't have the COVID vaccine. Why not tell them, I'm sorry, you can't be at this hospital anymore because we fired the staff? Make them own it. Make them the ones responsible, because they are the ones responsible, not you. So that's the point. Okay. The message we're sending is that we will not back down. We will not comply. And if you want to think of it in more perhaps radical terms, dangerous terms, hazardous terms, it's a shot across the bow. Okay. It's a final warning, if you will, that this is it. We're done with the polite compliance, polite non-compliance. And now if you come after us, because you've gotten rid of us, but now if you come after us, expect a fight, a real fight, a lethal fight. And no, I'm not joking. Every one of you who's watching this or is a part of this movement believes that freedom and your body and the right to determine what happens to your body is worth fighting for. Because it is. And you need to. And we have to let them know that in as kind and thoughtful and humble a way as possible, but with force and with earnestness. So that's that. That's what we've got with the rally. That's why we're doing the rally. There's a lot more details to be ironed out, but they really are details. You guys know the important information. The day, the time, 2 to 4 is the official time frame that we're looking at. Figure 12 to 6 is the overall time frame as far as people showing up, just wandering around, having a good time, and hopefully maybe helping clean up a little bit at the end. But it's the 28th. So that's not this Saturday, but it's next Saturday at the Capitol. Okay. And we're going to be, the area that I'm requesting is out by the fountain, basically the entire lawn. Okay. From the World War I memorial all the way up to the fountain, and then both sides past diagonals. That's what we're doing there. The other thing I wanted to do real quick is a follow-up on the thing that I kind of did as a last minute last night. This idea of a convention, why I think it's something to be looking at and considering. Just a real brief history lesson for some who either don't know or maybe have forgotten. The history, like the Continental Congress, in its forming, First Continental Congress really didn't do anything and produced the Olive Branch Petition, to which the response was basically by the king. And that actually turned a lot of the delegates, turned a lot of the states. They finally realized that this is not something they can negotiate out of. Produced the Second Continental Congress. These were the Continental Congress was don't want to say it was an ad hoc assembly necessarily. Most of the delegates were picked by the legislatures or had legislative endorsements, at least tacitly. But they're just their confidence, their legitimacy was determined by the people. And the people gave them legitimacy. The people believed in Congress, even though they made fun of them, even though there was all the jokes. The people gave legitimacy to the Congress. Same thing happened in 1787 with the Constitutional Convention. It was called for by disparate groups. It wasn't called for by Congress. Actually, the Confederation Congress opposed it. Didn't want it to happen. They only reluctantly agreed to it when it was already clear that it was going to happen anyway. Sorry, frog in the throat. So Congress didn't really even want the Constitutional Convention to happen, which of course they didn't call the Constitutional Convention. They called it the Convention in Philadelphia because they didn't know they were going to write a constitution. And the whole point of that convention was to change the Articles of Confederation, fix the problems with the Articles of Confederation. And that was the mandate from Congress: fix the Articles of Confederation. And by the way, anything you do needs to come to us for our approval. Well, they knew they couldn't do that. And as soon as they got together, they said, well, we've got to do something different. And so they did. They produced the Constitution. They didn't go back to Congress. They ignored Congress's command, decree, rule, whatever. They went straight back to the states who had sovereignty, the people. And they said, look, this is the document we produced, and here's what it takes to put it into effect. 3/4 of you say yes. 3/4 of the states say yes. Boom. It's now the Constitution. And they did. And it had legitimacy because the people gave it legitimacy. No other reason. The Congress, the established government, did not give the Constitution credibility. The people did through their sovereign states. But even that was the people exercising their sovereignty to ratify it. So on that premise, having a convention in our situation now, our constitution, our state constitution, provides a mechanism for a constitutional convention, but it has to come from either the governor or the legislature, and that's not going to happen. And I wouldn't trust anything that comes from either of those bodies right now. But if a call to convention went out, which is what I would kind of propose it would do, it would be publicized in a very widespread manner. Delegates from each county would be selected in some fashion. You could do it through referendum in the county. You could do it through your county commissioners. You could just decide we're going to select them by city. Those details can be figured out. You get together and you say, what do we need to do to fix the state? And you produce something. I'm not saying you have to rewrite the Constitution. I'm not saying you have to write a new Constitution. I'm not saying it has to produce anything in particular. What I'm saying is that if we get further down to next steps, and we talked about next steps last night, if we get further down on those next steps, it will be necessary to have some sort of polity behind it, driving it, rallying it, unifying it. The revolution was not just on the battlefield. It was a political revolution as well, and it required the politics. It was messy. It often is, both on the battlefield and in the political arena. But it can't be chaos, whatever the next steps are, if we have to go there. It can't be chaos, and it can't be factional. It can't be split up into regional conflicts and disparate groups. There has to be something unifying and motivating that the people ultimately can get behind. So there'll be more on that to follow. I just wanted to kind of put out what I was thinking in my head around that, and hopefully what I'm looking to hopefully achieve with that. Let's see. I think I've covered just about everything except for the last thing, which is we have to. I put a post on this a little while ago, but it's worth repeating, especially as we get into this rally and planning for it and inviting people to it. This issue has produced, in what I'm seeing, is a very interesting ideological coalition. There's a lot of people on the right, on the political right, that make up maybe the core of the people who are involved, but people who have not been active before, maybe don't find themselves political in any way, meaningful way. Maybe they look at themselves as moderate, centrist, maybe even a little on the left. They're all pissed off at this. And they're all joining hands with us together. And I would just urge people to remember that not everybody is going to agree 100% of the time on everything. Even people who are very much ideologically aligned are going to have their disagreements. And as long as we're facing this threat, this tyrannical threat of our governor, let's not lose allies by having irrelevant and foolish arguments. Let's keep the main thing. Let's keep united on that. Because if we lose on this, then all those other foolish arguments will, like I said, be completely academic and completely meaningless. So let's keep our focus if we can. Let's keep our spirits up. We must, because as my good friend Matthew Hayward pointed out, we have every reason to be optimistic right now. As dark as it is, we have every reason to be optimistic. There is every indication that this is a bluff. The governor's already backing off. Reichdel's already backing off the statements from yesterday. I think you will see come Monday, you will see a lack of enthusiasm for anybody enforcing the mask mandate in any meaningful way. You are starting to see cracks in the school boards, even the ones who are hardcore, and even the ones who are deciding ultimately not to challenge the mask mandate. You're starting to see little glimmers of cracks of, well, maybe I shouldn't really be paying attention to it. South Kitsap school board yesterday, I went, a lot of other people went. We made impassioned statements, told them they have to consider standing up against this. And at the very minimum, at the end, one of the board members proposed a motion and got it adopted that they would at least look into the legal ramifications of challenging the governor. Now, it was doomed to failure. We knew that from the get-go. The superintendent came out the very next day and said, no, we're not going to do it because we don't want to risk our money. But the mere fact that there was that little bit of movement shows that the pressure we are applying, that you all are applying, is having an effect. So I think that gives us cause for great optimism and should cause us to double our efforts, steel ourselves against what is coming, because what we have to face right now will be nothing compared to what we will face if we do nothing or if we surrender. You can't yield to an enemy like this. They are ravenous and they will continue to hunt us down and persecute us, quite frankly. So I think that's it. I think I'm going to wrap it up. I've said my piece about the whole legislative thing going around, and God bless Jim and Jessica for the video they did earlier. If you haven't seen that, I invite you to take a look at that. If you're friends with Jim Walsh or follow his page at all, there wasn't an earthquake. I kicked the stand. They do a pretty good rundown of why some of that, or why that stuff is actually quite foolishness going on. And my post is very clear. There's no legislative fix to be had right now. Maybe possibly if we change the makeup of the legislature, but as long as that tyrant is occupying that office, we're going to continue to be under his thumb and under his tyranny. And we need to be pushing back in the only language that he knows, which is force. So we've already shown that he's a coward and he'll run away from the slightest bit of pressure. So let's keep the pressure on. With that, I thank you all for tuning in. I hope this one wasn't quite as much of a ramble, but we'll keep doing these as necessary, and maybe it'll be a little bit more of a regular thing as I have thoughts to share with everyone that don't quite fit into a simple Facebook post. Follow the website. I can't stress that enough. I have no doubt Facebook's going to be shutting me down at some point. If nothing else, they're going to shut down the Facebook event page. I'm sure. I'd be really surprised if it survives all the way to the event without getting shut down. So follow the website. That's beyond their control for the time being. And we'll keep that updated as much as possible. The GoFundMe link's there. The PayPal link is there. I've shared it. Please continue to share. I appreciate everyone who's doing it. Share the picture, just the flyer, share the event, share the fundraising aspects of it, and keep sharing it as much as you can, reoccurring, so that people see it in their news feeds, in their cycle, because Facebook is going to censor the piss out of it. But the more we share it, the more we get it out there, the more we can get around their algorithms and get the word out. There will be advertising help coming on the radio. I know Todd Herman's already said that he'll help promote it via his show and his podcast. I'm going to work on getting Dory Monson to help at least talk about it a little bit. Katie Davis Court is helping out, trying to bring some of her resources on board, and we will get the word out beyond social media, but let's keep using social media while we can. And with that, I'm going to say good night. God bless. Keep the faith. Keep up the fight. We cannot lose. We can only surrender. God bless. Have a good night.